Continuing on Shulchan Aruch, Or HaChaim, Siman Resh Ayin Gimel, in Hilchot Kiddushim, you're up to Seif Vav in Daf Nun Gimel Amud Aleph of regular prints of your Mishna Beruras. And Maran writes, Im Kiddush bebeto v'shamash chenu v'shulchanu aruch lefanav yotze bo t'shapir abe makom seuda. We have a concept that we're all familiar with, Shomea Keoneh, that you could fulfill your obligation of having to say something with listening and having in mind to someone that is saying it and has you in mind, and both understand the language and the meanings, and that would be sufficient. So what if I am not in the makom of Kiddush because my neighbor, who is a worldwide chazan, is doing his best chazanut, and the window is open, my window is open, it's a completely different building, different place, bayit lebayit, and he's saying Kiddush, has in mind everyone that's listening to him. I was about to start my Kiddush in my house. My shulchan is in front of me. I have everything there. My suda is there. And I listen to him saying Kiddush. Can I be yotze with that Kiddush? The Kiddush, quote unquote, is not b'makom suda. Kiddush is being said in a different building. I happen to hear it. And says the Shulchan Aruch, that's completely fine, because it's as though I said the Kiddush by listening, Shomea Keoneh, and my Suda is right in front of me. I could be Yotze with that Kiddush, no problems. Uchgon, and we of course are talking about a case, Shenitkavena Shomea Latzet Umashmiya Lehotzi. Right? A lot of guests in this Chazan's house, so to speak, in the neighbor's house, and he says, I have Kavana to be motzi everyone that's listening to me. So it happens to be that his neighbor from a different building also is one that's listening to him. So you know he has you in mind, and you have in mind, and you will be fine. No problems. Now, can you do this l'chatchila, by the way? Absolutely yes. You can do this l'chatchila, and even there's a concept of Berov Am Hadrat Melech. You know, we spoke about this for those who remember still Siman Yud Zayin earlier on in Chol Tzitzit, that if you have a bunch of people about to say Birkat Litatef B'Tzitzit, better is for one of them to say for everyone, because Berov Am Hadrat Melech Eno Domeh Rabim O Haosim Et HaMitzvah Lemuatim Osim Et HaMitzvah. When you have a lot of people doing the mitzvah together, it's even more of a kavod for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So hence, you could even do this l'chatchila, right? So long as the other person hears your kiddush clear and loud in a different house, no problems. But if the shachen doesn't know how to say kiddush themselves, I imagine a neighbor doesn't know how to say kiddush themselves, right? Then the kiddush works even if you are not eating and you are in a different place. In other words, imagine you have an elderly fellow living across the high rise on Wilshire, in the 14th floor, you're in the 14th floor also, right? Is actually a case that happens to be true. In someone that lives in one of those high rises, actually 16th floor, right? And they'll say Kiddush for him, open the window, they open their window, right? You could say Kiddush for them even though that you're not drinking or eating. You just want to be motzihim. You don't have to be in the same place to be motzihim. You could say it from where you say it. Right now, Rabbi Moshe Feinstein has a tshuva, whether or not you could say Havdalah over the phone for a old age home, right? That happens to be in a remote place. So driving there is difficult. You don't have a person every Shabbat there spending time with them. So you want to say Havdalah for them over the phone. So that gets into already a different question of whether or not electronically mimicked voice is considered your extension or is maybe not at all, and it will be like a recording, not like you speaking, which becomes its own question. That Chazon Ish, surprisingly, was more sympathetic to leniency on that. Rav Moshe Feinstein was not, and Chacham Ovadia ends up being machmir, together with Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach and others. Again, a discussion for itself for a different time. But if it's not an electronic voice, if you are literally talking, but you're in a different place, that for sure works, right? There's no question that would be sufficient. Originally, when they thought that phone is taking your voice and taking it to the other place, right? That's when you saw that this actually is not an issue. When they're live listening to your voice, that would be certainly mo'il, would be certainly sufficient. And when Shulchan Aruch says that your shulchan is aruch, your table is set, it doesn't mean that you have to have a table set to be also with your neighbor's kiddush. Even if you're standing there and you know that you're going to immediately be eating here in this place and this around this shulchan, even if the shulchan is not set, it can still be yotzei, says the Chafetz Chaim over here, no problems. Says the Mishna Berura Od Lamed, וככל שנתכוון, לאו דווקא בעניין זה. דהו הדין בכל שמקדש לאחרים דין האחי, any person that says kiddush for anyone else, even if they're around the table, doesn't have to be for shachen across the street. Even if they're mamash sitting next to you, they're not going to be fulfilling their obligation if they don't have kavanah and you don't have kavanah. It has to be kavanah from the motzi and the yotzeh, from the recipient and the one that's saying the kiddush at all times. And when the Rav or the Gabbai or Shaliach Tzibur says the Kiddush in Bet Midrash, in Bet Knesset, לא יצא השומע אפילו אם מתכוון לצאת והוא רוצה לסעוד שם אחר כך. He is not going to be fulfilling his obligation, even if he has kavanah and he wants to stay and have Suda afterwards. אם כן נתכוון לשליח ציבור להוציאו. Unless the Rav, the Shaliach Tzibur, the Gabbai, has everyone in mind to be motzi them yedei chova. This becomes obviously a question for Brit Milah. When you have a Brit Milah on Shabbat morning, and you want the bracha that the person says to be his kiddush also, to be able to drink. Otherwise, how can he drink? He just finished Musaf. He's saying bracha of Koreta Brit, and he wants that to be his kiddush. He has to have kavanah that this should be his kiddush. Also, if you want this to be the kiddush for the tzibur, you have to have kavanah for that as well. Otherwise, if you don't have them in mind, you only have yourself in mind, it's not going to work. Says, but that's of course if they're eating right there and then at that place in that room. Says the Shulchan Aruch in Sif Zayin now. יש אומרים שאין מקדשין אלא לאור הנר. יש אומרים שאין הקידוש תלוי בנר. We have ner Shabbat, and then we have kiddush of ner Shabbat. Maran says there is an opinion in the poskim, which the Tur brings in the name of the father of his Rosh, Rabbeinu Asher, that a person should be saying kiddush in the same place as the Neros Shabbat. Right? This is Rabbeinu Asher in the last parak of Masechet Pesachim, in Arvei Pesachim, and the Tur brings those who argue with it and say no, it's not necessarily connected. Kiddush could be its own thing, Nerot Shabbat is its own thing, and therefore you don't need to have them in the same place. Therefore, if you have a better weather, nice, beautiful evening, and you want to go outdoors to have your Suda there, but you lit your candles inside the house by the dining room, right? Or inside, let's say you have a problem of flies, outside is cleaner because of the cold or because of the wind, whatever it is. You could then say kiddush in the chaser and eat, even though that your candles are inside the house. Why? The candles are there to add an ambiance, an oneg to Shabbat, not to restrict and restrain you and cause sa'ar v'hachi mistabra. Maran says at the end, hachi mistabra. That should be the logical discourse of the halacha, and that's the psak. Now, this of course doesn't mean, it is not talking about the case that you said the kiddush in the house and then you're eating in the chatzer, or you're saying kiddush in the chatzer and then you go back to the house to eat. Your kiddush has to be b'makom seuda. The question is if it's tied to the Nerot Shabbat, and the answer is no, it's not really tied to Nerot Shabbat in any significant way. Now, Zohar HaKadosh and Arizal, they are much more stringent than Shulchan Aruch. They say actually Kiddush is tied, the Seudah rather, is tied to the mitzvah of Nerot Shabbat, and therefore you should have Seudah b'makom ner, ner b'makom Seudah, and therefore if you want to say Kiddush in the Chatzer, or on the rooftop, outdoors, then you should have ahead of the time a place for Nerot, and you should light there. Ben Ish Chai actually brings in Hilchot Kiddush Mishna Berura Siman that before you say Kiddush, right, before you look at the Nerot, actually, because they're mamash interconnected, and again, Kaf HaChaim also sides with that in our Siman in Ot Mem Zayin, that a person should be doing that lechatchila. Now, Shulchan Aruch also says that even though that you don't see the place of the ner, it's good, and that's what he ends with, that Hachim Istabra, you should ask a question based on what we had earlier on in Siman Resh Samech Bet. The Maran Paskins over there, that you could light the nerot in one corner of the house, and you could eat in the chaser, right? If the nerot are not long enough that they will last until the night, if you did this, there will be a bracha lebatala, right? If you're lighting the candles in the house and you're eating outside, and by the time you come back in, the lights are off because you didn't have enough oil or long enough of a candle, then it's the bracha lebatala. And here is paskening that if you don't see the ner, you're yotze, right, in the shat aseuda. Now, there are many simple answers given to this. That's not really a stira at all. That even though that you don't have to say kiddush in the place of Nerot Shabbat, but you have to benefit from Nerot Shabbat, right? It's still an obligation that you have to do, and the reason for it is shalom bayit, that you shouldn't bump into things, you shouldn't fall over yourself. So you want it to be in a place that you benefit from, and you actually want it to be in the time that you benefit from. So we're not talking about the case that you have a short candle, you put it by makom seudah, and you're eating outside, and by the time you come back in, it's all turned off. That, of course, it will be a safek bracha lebatala. We're talking about the case that that's not an issue. You're going to be benefiting from this, but not a shat seudah. That's what Rab Chaim Meneshti writes in Chelek and Gdola. That's the simple answer. There are other answers, but again, this would be sufficient. Now, whenever Maran writes Stam v'yesh, halacha is like what? Halacha normally is Stam, and when he says yesh omrim v'yesh omrim, halacha is like what? Halacha is like the second one, right? Yesh v'yesh, halacha ki yesh batra. And here is yesh omrim v'yesh omrim, right? Yesh omrim she'en mekadeshin le'or haner, v'yesh omrim she'en kiddush talui baner, right? That's how we would say that halacha should be like the yesh batra, right? So if that's correct, why does Maran have to say hachim istabra? Right? In other words, we spoke about this many times, that these are not klalei barzel, these are not etched in stone type of klalim. It is something that the majority of the time it's sodek, and you have different sides to the machloket, but it's a question that one should ask. If Maran writes the Shulchan Aruch in a way that I could understand what he means by saying yesh omrim veyesh omrim, and he means to say that halacha is like the second yesh, so why does he have to say over here that it's mistaber like the second yesh omrim? Halakha should be like, I know halakha should be like the second Yeshomrim. You said it already to me by not saying it. You said it because that's the Klal Shulchan Aruch. So why do you have to say it over here? It's a good, fair question, right? It's a fair question. So why does Maran have to be machriya like the second set? Now, the Birkei Yosef, Maran Chida, asks this question, and he says that usually when Maran is machriya, had the machriya Maran le'alacha, al harov hu mitzat shadat hu da'at gedolei poskim or rubam. Maran is paskening something yesh v'yesh omrim is because it's the majority or all of the poskim. ולכן בזה גילה דעתו שמלבד שההלכה כיש אומרים בתרה, שהוא דעת רוב הפוסקים. Here he has to say that even though that you would know already from yesh v'yesh, the ההלכה כיש בתרה, that the majority of the poskim hold like the second side, that the kiddush is not related to the nerot Shabbat. But there is another reason to side with this, and that is that's the svara. The svara is you don't really need to have nerot. Where you eat is not connected to the mitzvah of kiddush, and that's why Maran has to say. Now, this you have to go through Shulchan Aruch, figuring out each time that he says it what exactly he means. But that's the gist of this psak, and that concludes really Siman Resh Ayin Gimel and the halachot of kiddush. We're going to be starting the halachot of Seudah of Shabbat, of having lechem mishneh, and all the requirements of B'siyat HaPat. Be'ezrat Hashem will continue in the days to come. Chazak u'baruch.